Welcome back. So over the weekend I was working on trying to sort out the last of the air conditioning system. One of the things I told you about last time is we've now got a climate control system, and this is basically what it looks like. It's a oval bezel, and that's where it's going to live. So I moved the landing gear lever there and actually slightly moved over the parking brake, so that's still on the same panel there, just sort of moved over and down. So hopefully that'll work out well. And so the landing gear switch is moved here, and so you can see I've got it in the down and the up position there, just to show how it's going to move when you're transitioning from one to the other. So that's where it will be for now, right at your hand resting on the console there. So the other thing I had to do was I had to rotate this the evaporator unit, because it needed to be completely vertical after I spoke with the guys at Vintage Air, otherwise it wasn't going to drain correctly. So that meant I had to reroute these different lines there for the vents, for the defrost, and also the front vents as well. And then there's also two vents on the bottom that just basically blow out on your feet, and we'll be moving one or just sort of routing one so it redirects over there to the co-pilot side. So that's basically most of that routing done, and the control unit for where that's going to live. So obviously those other four knobs disappeared, which was nice. Cleaned up things a little bit, and then back under here, this is where the lines run now. So gone and got this sorted out. So there's the two heater hose lines that are going to run. They're going to be 5/8 inner diameter, and then you've got the two air conditioning lines. One's the cold AC fluid coming back, and then the hot going back to the compressor. So they basically just run down the center of the keel now, and we're just going to, because we don't have conduits big enough for those put in there, we're just going to basically strap them together and just put some reinforcement there so they won't move around, and then just lay them up down the middle of the keel there, and they'll fit in between those conduits. So that was fortunate we left space for something like this. I knew it was going to kind of be there, I just didn't realize we'd have so much. Anyway, so there's the lines there that we have, and just to go over how the heating system is going to work, let me just explain this to you. So we're going to be pulling heat out of the engine using the normal heat loop that would be for the car that runs through the car heater, and we're going to do it the same way. So how that works is you've got this first line here which comes out of the engine, and so that's going to run all the way up the center keel and up into the evaporator unit through the heater core, and then it'll return back on this other one, and then it's going to go through this heat exchanger that we have here, and then finally return to the engine. And then the heat exchanger is the one that I've shown you before, that's going to be warming the fuel in the tanks to stop it from gelling. So you've got one line that's coming in, which basically comes off the header tank and via the fuel pump that's sort of just underneath it there, and or at least a pump. It's a fuel pump, but we're not using it to supply fuel, just to turn the fuel around to warm it up. And then the return will just basically run back there and into the straight tanks off of a T, and I showed you this before. Anyway, so that's just summarizing that again. So that's how the whole heat system works, and we may end up changing it, but this is how I think it's probably going to work initially, and we'll just see how it pans out. And then with respect to the air conditioning system, how the system works here, we basically have the compressor here running off the engine, and the cold or compressed fluid there runs into the condenser, which is sitting in front of the engine there, and that's probably going to have its own separate fan on it, but basically runs into the condenser there, and then gets condensed, and then comes out of there, and it goes into this dryer unit, and then from the dryer it runs up the keel and back up into the cabin, into the evaporator via this line there, and obviously all the coolness is drawn out of that and put into the cabin for when you need air conditioning, and then the warm vapors from that return and goes back to the compressor, where it goes back through the same cycle again. So that's the whole AC and heating system in a nutshell. And back in the shop, Jeff is here cutting out the opening for the GTN 750 for the center stack, and I just printed out a template on paper there, and he just aligned it and glued it into place, and he's using the Dremel with a sort of cut-off wheel there so we can do a nice little clean job on that one, because it's nice to have that one nice and accurate. And this is the openings there on the rear of the center console for the air conditioning ducts, so those need to be cut out. And the guys got this first of the 4-plane upper skin molds finished here, and it just needs to be braced and then released, or released and then braced. So that's the first one of those done. And I didn't get any video, but I got the center panel cut out as well, and you see I've gone and put different nut plates in here and tapped out these other holes on the aluminum channel here, so all the panels can be now screwed into place there. And this is the one which is going to be that little add-on for the firewall that we needed to allow room for the parachute to sit in there and the rocket to be able to deploy. So that one's now obviously was laid up there last time, it just needs to be trimmed now. And so then it will fit kind of like, just sort of orienting it here for you with one hand with the camera and one hand with the part. It's basically going to sort of add on to there and just sort of change the angle of the firewall there and allow it to sort of have more room for the parachute there. So that's kind of how it's going to replace what's already there, but just have it angled. And I think it's about 15 degrees of angle. Anyway, back over to the dyno today, and Ed's been over there and doing a bunch of different things, hooked up a bunch more sensors, and the guys from Motec actually arrived a couple of days early, and so they've been doing a few things on the engine there, and turns out that the dyno here is actually kind of broken. So this little load cell here isn't dialed in right. It's it should be under more tension than that, and so unfortunately it's not something that we can fix. So even though we've got the engine on there and we're seeing it produce power and we've got everything sort of dialed in, we're not getting accurate power numbers. And I'll just let you here sit and watch this in a second and just see. And you can see when we run the engine up, we get up to about 4,000 RPM maximum, but the maximum torque that it's showing is only about 260 foot-pounds, when it really should be double that. And what's interesting is when the dyno stops, the torque number is showing like negative, I think 120 pounds or something like that. Anyway, I'll let you watch this for a little bit, and just to see what's going on.
Oh yeah. Slow sweep to 4,000 RPM,
right,
and then we can steady state it.
You don't have it limited at 3,800 right now, do you?
It's limited at 4,000 right now.
Okay, gotcha. Sounds good.
Sounds great. Yeah, it's all smooth.
Oh, really good.
Yeah.
Did you take one of those springs out of there? Nice.
That was a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay, so what's going to happen with the engine now? We're taking it off this dyno because obviously it's broken and we can't wait for them to fix it. So it's not really helping us, giving us accurate numbers. Although Motec spent a lot of time today and made a lot of progress in terms of dialing the engine in. So we're going to bring it back to our shop and get the prop back on and see if we have any other issues that we need to sort out. And in the meantime, there's 3 other things that we need to solve. First of all, it looks like we're getting boost creep in there on the second turbo, so I think we need to put in the wastegate that we had before instead of using the internal wastegate, which isn't actually a big deal. It should be fairly easy to put that in. Just got to plumb that in. And then we have an issue with the fuel rail pressure not reading the information correctly into the ECU, which needs to be sorted out. We need to research that a little bit more and probably reach out to Les up there in Pennsylvania, who might be able to provide the information. And then also we have a similar issue with reading information off of the injectors. We just need to get that sorted out as well. So there's 3 different things that need to be sorted out, and then it needs a little bit more tuning. So we'll tune it some more once we have those things sorted out on our engine stand with the prop, and then we'll be looking for another dyno to take it and get the final numbers for what the exact horsepower and torque is. And as you saw on the current dyno there, it was showing about 160 horsepower when it was maxed out there, and about 260 foot-pound of torque, and really those numbers should be doubled, is probably more accurate. So it would have been, you know, around 320 horsepower and around 500 foot-pound of torque, and that sounds about what it should have been based upon the tune that's in it right now. But anyway, just looking at this screenshot here, you can see that yellow line in the middle there is sort of showing the one data point there for the maximum RPM, about 3,000 or 3,900, almost 4,000 RPM. And then right below that you can see the pressures on both of the turbos. So the orange one, or the reddy orange one, is the first turbo, and then the other one is the second turbo, and you can see it was actually still climbing there, which kind of indicates boost creep there. So that's something we'll solve with that new wastegate. And then if you look down to the further down the bottom there, you can see you can see ambient temperature. That's the air going into the first turbo. And then further down there you can see turbo compressor inlet temperature, and that's the air coming out of that turbo. And then temperature compressor outlet, the second last one, that's the air going into this coming out of the second turbo. And then you've got the intercooler temperature, and you see actually the intercooler is doing a really good job. Anyway, so pretty happy with all those numbers, and we'll be able to analyze a little bit more when we get it back to the shop and get the prop on there. And I really want to thank Ed for putting in all the time to get everything sorted out. So when Motec showed up, and Drake, and unfortunately I can't remember the other guy's name, was there, but when they showed up, they just didn't have to do much but just focus on tuning the engine. So they got everything done that they could have got done with what we still have left to do with this boost creep and these other two issues. So we'll see them back, at least we'll be seeing Drake back at our shop at some point to tune the engine once the prop's on, and then again once more once we find another dyno. Anyway, that's our update for the first half of this week, and the next update will be again Saturday morning, or the morning of our open house. So thanks again for watching.